For years, we've asked for cheap, strong, wide anamorphics. Now, we might have finally got it with Greyjoy's 50mm 1.8 times full frame anamorphic. Remember this animation from when I talked about Surei's early lenses and how they couldn't fit EF or PL cameras? Doesn't it look a lot like this? Greyjoy is pushing the rules with their new 50mm anamorphic lens, which not only covers full frame, but is also compatible with PL and EF mounts, making the lens an option for many filmmakers that felt left out by the countless cheap mirrorless anamorphics in the last couple of years. This is a 1.8 times anamorphic lens, delivering the perfect squeeze for 4:3 capture and 2.4:1 delivery. I've seen very little corner vignette at open gate full frame on the S1H, which can be quickly fixed with color correction in the edit, or cropped out entirely. With a 2.4:1 final aspect ratio, you get a horizontal field of view of roughly equivalent to a 30mm lens, which increases with a smaller sensor like Super 35 or Micro Four Thirds. Here's a field of view comparison with the Surei 50mm full frame. It is not the smallest lens around, measuring 15 centimeters from the front to the rear element. It features 82mm filter threads and 85mm outer diameter, which is great for clamp-on matte boxes. On a cine trend, we have geared focus and iris rings for motors. Iris goes from T2.9 to T22, while focus has roughly 270 degrees of throw and comes down to 70 centimeters. We'll come back to minimum focus later on. We also have a 1/4 inch 20 screw hole at the bottom of the lens for attaching support. Not that I think that I'll ever use that, after all, the lens is not that heavy. With a full metal construction, the lens weighs 1 kilogram or 2.2 pounds, with slight variation depending on the mount of your choice. And speaking of mounts, you can pick from a big list: Sony E, Leica L, Micro Four Thirds, Canon RF, Canon EF, and PL, the last two being the big deal. I chose PL and I'll keep choosing PL every time I have the option. PL mounts allow me to get a really secure lock on the body. Still on the subject of mounts, you will see that mirrorless options look super neat and normal, while EF and PL have very protruding rear elements. While this is unusual for EF lenses, it is a common thing for cinema lenses. What this means for you and me is that while this lens covers full frame and has an EF mount, you will not be able to fit it onto a focal reducer or an adapter with a built-in ND filter. I repeat, you will not be able to fit the Greyjoy 50mm onto a focal reducer or any kind of filtration that goes on behind the mount. Now I just have to repeat this 1,000 times more in the comments. It's time to address the main challenge. This lens uses a synchro focus design to focus anamorphic and spherical blocks together. The consequence is the squeeze changes as you rack towards close focus. 1.8 times squeeze is true from 4 meters and further, then 1.76 times at 2 meters, 1.66 at 1 meter, and 1.62 times at minimum focus or 70 centimeters. The only way to prevent this and always have the 1.8 times squeeze factor is to use diopters and try to keep focus always at infinity or at least past that 4 meter mark. What this means ultimately is if you squeeze your entire timeline by 1.8, your close focus shots will look a little mumpy. Here's my face at close focus and 1.8 times D-squeeze. And this is what it should look as I compensate for the squeeze change at close focus. My best suggestion here is to eyeball how subjects should look and adjust the scale sliders to get there. If you're filming in any aspect ratio that is wider than 4:3, you will have some extra footage sides that can be pushed back into the frame. When I ran out of spare sides, I adjusted the height and accepted a little bit of crop to have a natural looking face. The lens goes up for crowdfunding at first, and during this launch phase, you can get it for just under $1,400 with PL mount and an alternative EF mount, or for $1,120 in mirrorless mounts. After this stage is over, the lens will retail for $1,600. You can learn more about the specifics of the launch and timeline on Greyjoy's campaign page, linked in the description. Greyjoy's 50mm is sharp when you get it right. Getting it right can be challenging sometimes though. If you have an external monitor or can check focus while recording directly on your camera, this should help. I had a hard time spotting critical focus, especially at non-close focus distances, as everything seems sharp, but you still have enough separation for the footage to look blurry if you get it wrong. Already super sharp in the center area when wide open, stopping down the lens becomes a creative decision. The image becomes much sharper towards the edges, while vignetting gets more defined and smaller in the frame. I had a hard time getting this anamorphic to flare, like a really hard time. On a bright day, my motorcycle high beams were not enough to do it.
I can't even see, no flares, no flare.
I only succeeded by getting the sun directly in the shot, and even then, it was mild. Pointing a strong flashlight directly down the barrel does the trick, but that's very purposeful, so don't expect surprise lens flares everywhere. The distortion we find in Greyjoy's 50mm is unusual. It's a light type of mustache? It's a light type of mustache distortion, as it seems to barrel out along the horizontal lines, but pincushion along the verticals. This might seem odd straight out of camera, but it is also easy to correct in post for traditional anamorphic barrel distortion. Bokeh is actually subtle, as with 50mm T2.9, you have to be at minimum focus for things to start actually looking like ovals. Still, they're not that huge. On the upside, they don't distort much around the frame as you pan, just getting cut up a little bit towards the left and right sides. After all these tests and playing with the lens for many weeks, I can say I really dig it. On a personal note, I find that 50mm 1.8 times anamorphic is almost too wide, where we get too much depth of field by taking 2 steps back and closing 2 stops down. A lot of the anamorphic character, bokeh, is lost. I can really feel the difference provided by Vazen's extra stop of light at T2.1 and the impact of the different optical designs. Although at heart we have 2 50mm 1.8 times scopes capable of covering full frame. To understand more how these different designs work, check out my anamorphic cookbook. Still, Vazen is priced at $8,000 and Greyjoy is under $1.5. When it comes to budget, Greyjoy is winning hard by making reasonable compromises and delivering an outstanding product. Are you backing the campaign? How does this fit in your current lens lineup? I've seen lots of people complaining about the protruding rear optics and the mumps. How do you feel about them? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you for hanging out, and I'll see you next time. Chito Ferradens, out.